Okay. All right, let's call F&A together. I hate it when you do that on the machine. Mr. Mayhew. Mr. Mayhew is now here. So, Dina, if you'll note attendance, and all committee members are present, as well as the mayor and city staff. Let's move to approval of the agenda. Are there any alterations or comments in regards to the agenda for tonight?
Nope.
No, sir. Okay. All right. Unless there are objections, we will go with the agenda as presented. Hearing no objections, we are good. All right. Public comments. Time for individuals considering themselves public. Could be city staff. To go ahead and make public comment for the committee. Is there anybody wishing to partake of that privilege? I don't. There's one attend. Oh, Mike, you're an attendee. I don't see any hands in the audience here, and nor do I see hands online. So we will consider public comment as closed. All right. Let's move on to approval of minutes dated October 3, 2023. Chair has no comments or revisions in regards. Any other comments or revisions from committee?
No, none for me at this time.
Okay. Lesser objections, we'll take the minutes of October 3rd, 2023 as approved as presented. Hearing no objections, they are approved. Let's move on to approval of warrants and claims. For the claims approval report dated October 23, 2023. I have received no email questions that I am immediately aware of. I'll take a quick look. And chair has no questions or comments, queries. Committee members, do you have any queries in regards to?
I do not at this time.
And a quick look again, I see no. Okay, I have no questions in regards to email. All right, so we'll move on. Unless there are objections, we'll take the warrants report as presented as approved. All right, we'll take it as approved. Thank you. All right, with that, we'll move on to Agenda Bill 23-125, amendment to the agreement for legal services for Ogden Murphy LLC. This would be proposed to actually make the motion and approve that in next council meeting. Who would talk to this? Go ahead.
Seems pretty straightforward. Move to approve it on the consent agenda.
Thank you.
All right, let's there objections. We'll move that as approved and move it forward to consent agenda.
Oh, you're putting it on consent agenda?
Yep.
Okay.
Seems pretty straightforward stuff.
And if anybody objects, only takes one, we'll pull it off.
Yep.
All right, let's move on to discussion items. I guess I'm probably late in this, but I'll make a suggestion. You did a pretty quick talk of the plans for the rate study in Parks and Public Works. You want to give that same discussion and we can move pretty quickly through that one.
Sure.
So,
good evening. So we have been in contact with the vendor and we have got a scope developed for a fiscal health review for the utility system. And that work is planned to be November. And we have scheduled to bring that to council at the second meeting in November and the first meeting in December, if any action is required to adjust those rates accordingly. As for the long-term utility rate study.
Sorry, Director Chambliss. I'm sorry. Which council meeting will we approve that potentially?
The first reading would be at the second meeting in November.
Okay.
And the second reading would be at the first meeting in December.
Approval will be first meeting in December.
Okay.
And then for the long-term rate study, we're working on that scope still. We're still in negotiations with the vendor. And the anticipation is to have that work begin at the beginning of the year
Mhm.
and be at the committee level in spring and conclude by August, September timeframe. So it's out of the way for our budget activities next year.
Fantastic news. I'd say there's no question that we'll need to do something with the rates. So we should absolutely, not if, but how much. It might be easier, no objection, of course, that this would go to Parks and Public Works, but since the only thing we're changing is the inflation factor, none of the assumptions about projects or timing are being revisited for this. Parks and Public Works may not need to weigh in on that. It may just be a, rerunning the financial numbers, but up to them. But the key thing is we should move very quickly to just revised rates using the same methodology, just with the new numbers because of different inflation factors. So just sounds like the right timing, and let's just keep it moving.
Okay, there was some consideration on projects, but we'll let Parks and Public Works handle it.
Fine. Are some of the projects being relooked at or timing on that as well?
We're just
In this
going to
first thing?
update the completed ones.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're just going to sort of update for, I see. Got it. Thank you.
All right, with that, let's go to discussion item number 4, community survey update. Who would talk to us about that one?
Dana's.
That would be me, and my light is not very good in this room. I apologize. I just wanted to give you guys a quick update. I know that interim city administrator Chambliss let you know that a couple of meetings ago that our contractor for our community survey, had made a mistake on one of the questions. There were 3 possible responses, and they inadvertently offered the same potential answer twice. Was discovered within 2 weeks, but there were about 175 answers to that question that we would no longer be able to use. We worked through with the company a solution to that mistake since it was on their end, and they will be offering us another random sample online survey with that question and one more as we move forward. So I can answer any questions you have. The survey does close today, end of business day today. According to the survey company, we had very high rate of return. So even with that one question having those answers scrubbed, as they put it, we will still have a low margin of error for that question and even lower for the entire survey. And we will be bringing a full presentation to you on November 13th. The contractor will, excuse me.
Go ahead.
Hi, Ms. McCall. Just want to see if I understand what you just summarized for us. If I understood you correctly, there's the survey was, there was a specific sample population selected to answer it. We have a high rate of return, which is going to give us a high confidence rate in the answers.
Mm-hmm.
However, this question will not be usable, I would think, at all because of that error. And therefore, we're going to rerun the survey with a new population and a corrected question, or I just sort of not clear.
Just that, they're going to redo that question. You will still have a high number of people that were still responded to that question after it was corrected. It was only in the online version. Paper survey that went out had the correct potential answers listed. So say we got close to 600 answers total survey. For that particular question, that'll be 175 less. But the margin of error for that question will still be well within what we would expect for a good rate of return. And then for the entire survey, it is even lower margin of error because the rate of return would be higher for all the rest of the questions. Did I explain that right, Mike?
I think I understood that, but having spent a career dealing with such surveys, we need to have this relooked at. You've got a clearly skewed population, skewed to a particular type of respondent. That is one who used a paper response. You can't just exclude those or.
We're not excluding any paper.
Sorry, statistically, that question is ruined, and you can't draw statistical conclusions the way you're saying because of the bias that's introduced into the problem with the response. So I think we need to have that question looked at more closely. It sounds like the rest of the survey. If I could just finish my
Okay,
point.
okay,
No,
go ahead.
I mean, please don't cut me off. All I'm saying is, sounds like the rest of the survey is in great shape.
Mhm.
I'm really worried on that question that we don't improperly make conclusions when statistically that's not warranted.
Okay, but I believe what was stated is on that specific question, they were going to follow it up with a phone survey on that particular question to try to address the issue of it being incorrectly stated in part of the survey. Okay, so that's agreed. Initial results, I would throw that question out. I would look at the random phone survey for any judgment call on that particular question.
That was the point I was trying to make.
Yeah.
Is just as long as we have I just want to make sure that we're careful about
With confidence.
yeah. Dewey wins, right? So we just need to be really careful about making sure that we handle that correctly. But it sounds like, without going into the details, it sounds like I didn't quite understand the details of how that was going to be addressed. But Ms. McCall, it sounds like we have a plan to address that question, and we'll see how that works out and see where we end up. Is that correct?
Yes, we do have a plan, and we will be resurveying that question, plus maybe another extra question to add in there too, based on council direction on timing. So yes, and it's going to be another random sample postcard sending out. Please take this survey online type of thing like we did with this one. So we will definitely be resurveying that question, and you'll have results from the survey with that question, whether or not you want to put any weight on it. I understand that point, but I just wanted to let you know that they will be resolving this issue and making it right, redoing that question.
Got it. And so when you bring us the results, you'll be able to bring us, hey, here's all the other questions and kind of our statistical confidence levels and so forth. Okay, here's this question, handle a little differently. After our remediation, here's where we ended up in confidence levels on this one. Is that sort of what we should expect?
Yeah, exactly. We will make sure that the contractor notes that question and makes you very aware of that was the one that had the issue with it. So, and then they'll redo it at a later date based on your direction.
Got it. Thank you.
Very cool. Thank you. With that, we'll move off to number 5, ERP update.
That's going to fall to me. Jana and I are the last people standing here. So we are still digging through the numbers, zeroing them in to put together a complete package for you. But let me bring you up to speed of where we're at now. So currently the finance department is up and running. So the Tyler is being used for the budget, operating funds, etc. currently. What the focus is now is to get the HR modules up and running, so we can go live before the end of the year. There are some advantages to making that switch at the first of the year when it comes time to calculate employee tax withholding, etc. So we're trying hard to meet that date. Currently, we do not have a signed MOU with any of the 3 bargaining groups to make the switch to bi-monthly paychecks. So we have a scheduled path through this. The hope is by mid next month, when we come back to talk, I can report that we do. We have a tentative agreement with the police. We have a presentation scheduled that the fire requested at the end of the month. And the contract that we're presenting to the traffic contract with the Teamsters addresses the issue in the contract, which is their preference to go that way. So we have a plan. Hopefully it all comes together and that all works out. The next major module to go into effect is Public Works. Public Works is prepared. Thank you. We have the equipment. I got the software. I got the spreadsheets from Tyler after about 2 months of me getting here because I knew what we were facing. And then as soon as we got the hardware, we laid into starting to gather the data that we need to have prepared and ready to go for Tyler on the first meeting. So I believe kickoff for that is scheduled for next month. Public Works will begin the process of developing their ERP program with the hopes that by summertime, the work order system is up and running and we're operating at Public Works in that manner. There are still a couple little finance modules, grant accounting, et cetera, that need to be turned up. We have them delayed currently because everybody's focused on getting the payroll modules up and running. We have some staff on leave, et cetera. So our staff is down. So everybody is pulling on the rope to get this up and running and in effect. Now there are other modules and a budget issue that we need to discuss and address. We are planning to do that in the first meeting in November. Some modules have been identified as necessary. Some modules have been identified as desired. We will be presenting those modules to you and the associated costs. Additionally, we have some true ups with staff costs, et cetera, and implementation costs. Some of the implementation programs ran longer. Finance was one of them. And so we incurred more costs than we had planned on. So we are zeroing in on those numbers and we will be presenting those in November to go from there. Currently, I have confidence in the term limited, those are the words we use here, sorry. Term limited employee that we brought in to guide the Tyler project, and they are cranking through it and they are helping the staff. I have also temporarily suspended work at home for some of the staff for 1 day a week so that they are in the office and can use that resource more conveniently. Plus that resources can look over the shoulder and help them through whatever issues develop. So that's where we're at.
Any questions or comments? Go ahead.
I don't have anything at this time.
So just a couple questions, but the first is just to make sure I'm clear with regard to the unions and the going to the twice monthly. What are they currently on a like every 2 weeks or what is it that is the switch for them from what to what?
Currently, we're on a monthly payroll.
And this is going to twice a month payroll
Correct.
Instead of monthly.
Correct.
Okay. Another, just making sure I've got this right in my mind. Am I correct that we took the implementation costs of the ERP system, which had previously been accounted for in the revolving fund, and we moved all of that out to a capital fund? Is that a correct recollection?
I have to throw it to you, Jenna. Sorry.
That was discussed during a potential amendment, but the amendment, I think the preference was that we don't move it at the same time that we make an amendment. So right now it's in the IT fund as part of that.
Okay, got it. The reason I'm asking is I'm just thinking ahead with regard to my next question, which is, I think, my last question on this, but I have the idea that we think we're going to have, that we have some overruns on that budget. And I think that was some of the things you were alluding to a moment ago about when we might have a real good lock on that and kind of some things you're doing to manage that. But if that's right, I'm just trying to think about how that's going to flow through our financials and how that's going to hit all our funds. So if it's still in the revolving fund, that means the revolving fund would presumably need to increase its charge outs to recover the excess spending at whatever level it ends up being approved at or happening at, but that would get recovered in the normal course by higher charge outs to all the operating funds. I'm just wondering, have you had time to think about that? Is that the path you're on? Or are you thinking about trying to bring in some one-time money from fund balances or capital funds or somewhere else like that to cover this? Or kind of where do you see this kind of, I don't want to get ahead of your thinking, but generally where you kind of see this going?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes. So some of it is the revolving fund. Some of it, we're looking at one-time monies. Some of it, I'm looking at some of the modules and their allocations, and maybe we need to adjust them. Utilities should be paying for utilities module. And that wasn't necessarily the way it was set up originally. So we're adjusting some of those also. So we're doing a combination of things, and we will be bringing forth our best recommendation. There are other options we can do, obviously, but yes.
Go ahead. Follow up.
So that sounds fantastic. I'm really pleased to hear that. My own view is that I would really like to see us avoid burdening current or future operating funds for what is, in my view, primarily a capital project. And I'd really like to see us find funding for whatever overruns we have to find from fund balances that aren't otherwise committed, or from, if we can't find any outside, anywhere in general funds, then to get them from capital funds. And if we have to put off some projects to fund it, then so be it. But I think our operating funds are under tremendous pressure, particularly trying to fund all the inflationary costs with our limited revenue sources. So I hate to see any further burden on our operating funds. So I certainly encourage us to find existing fund balances or capital funds as the source for paying for whatever overruns. Not that I support any particular overrun, but we're going to have some. I know we're working to be as smart as we can about that, but whatever they are, I really encourage us not to have that end up hitting operating funds if we can.
As part of our discussion on that same date, we'll also be bringing forth a staffing plan with some recommended changes, which also will help relieve some pressure also.
Yeah. And just by the way, obviously, that was my comments I just made were in relation to things hitting the general fund. For things hitting utilities, I think your comments sounded just fantastic, making sure we're hitting the right amount into utilities. And of course, they're just the utility funds. So, but it sounds like you're considering all of that. So that sounds fantastic. But over on the general fund side, my comments were directed primarily there.
Understand.
All right. Any other questions, comments? All right. If not, we'll move on. Next agenda item would be legislative priorities. I had not prepared anything for tonight. Okay, we'll move on from that. Let's take note, or did you have something for discussion? Okay, go ahead.
So when we last discussed at this committee, legislative priorities, we had the 2023 legislative priorities And we had some discussion in this committee about making some changes to that. I was frankly astonished when we then, without any further discussion at this committee or at council, presented draft legislative priorities that were completely different and presented them to our legislators. So I don't really know how this happened, but 3 of the items on the list we presented have not been discussed at a single council meeting this year. In the whole year, the topic's never been discussed. And so how that can end up on a legislative priorities with at least some discussion, I think I'm really astonished, but I think we need to go through these. I think Mayor was correctly pushing us to update these and get these ready in time for the legislative session. That's the right thing for us to do. And if these items are indeed what's going to be on our list, we need to have some discussion at council and make sure we're all behind these. So I think some discussion is needed on this, and we're getting later and later into the year. The legislative session is getting sooner and sooner. So if we don't have that discussion tonight, I think that's fine, but I think we need to have it soon. And then I think we need to get it in front of council soon so that we can finalize this and have our voice count.
Go ahead.
Councilmember Mayhew, are you wanting to add additional topics to the 2020 legislative priorities?
What, I mean, I've got a lot of comments on this. So I'm not asking for more. I think some of these, I'm surprised. I think perhaps they shouldn't be here.
Mhm.
Some of them are vague and I don't even understand what we're saying. For example, police pursuit, further expand crimes eligible for pursuit. Sounds good so far, to include auto theft, good. And some property crimes. Well, which property crime? I don't know what that means. So I just don't know what some of this stuff means. And I just want to make sure that police pursuit is in fact one of our top priorities, since this year we haven't discussed that again since what the legislature did last session. So maybe that should be there. We just haven't had any discussion at council about that. So, and I mean, I've got comments on a bunch of these, so I don't want to sort of get out in front of you guys if you're not ready to have this discussion, but I think we should have it soon.
Can we do a redistribution of the priorities to committee and have that as a discussion item that we're prepped for in the next committee meeting, and then take it to council after that?
So the same one on F and A next time.
Yep.
So you're saying,
But I'd like a current copy of the priorities, just to bring it to the top of my inbox, please.
Okay.
That's
you
okay.
mean email it or what?
Email.
Okay.
And-
So,
Well,
so I would say at the last, when we were looking at 2023 and reviewing those, one of the questions was, what is the public safety or what are the issues for our police and fire? And the public safety items were added based on input from our police, as well as some of these rise to the level of AWSC as well. Same way with the revenues. The question was, what are the revenues? We didn't understand them. And so this further clarification on those.
Pete, I just want to make sure when we go to council, make sure we're all on the same page. Go ahead.
Yeah, and Mayor, appreciate your comments. I'm not arguing against any of these necessarily. I'm just saying we haven't had the discussion. I just want to have that discussion and make sure that we're all aligned on these and we all agree these are the ones. So maybe in particular with the public safety ones, as was just mentioned, maybe I know we ask a lot of police chief, but maybe we could have whomever's appropriate kind of talk to us about why these are the key ones. And maybe that doesn't have to happen at this committee. Maybe that's happens at the full council. I just want to make sure we've got a path to getting the council behind whatever we adopt. Because otherwise, look, there's 8 elected folks here. If we're not all on the phone with our and meeting with our legislators, this is not going to have nearly the punch that it needs. And so I just want to get everyone on board, speaking to this, understanding it. And I'm just concerned that we're not there.
Okay. And let's get everybody, even if there's no changes, it's good to have the discussion and make sure that all 7 members are on the same line.
Right. So do you want a committee of the whole then? at council?
Go ahead.
We'll need that, but let's get it at least discussed here
Let's
first.
do F and
Yeah.
A first, then we'll take it to council. So I do it under F and A.
But maybe we could bring it, it might even be something that requires a roundtable. So maybe we could just think about fitting this onto the agenda for the full council, not at this coming council meeting, but at the next one.
Next one, not, yeah, not the next one. Next one after. Matter of fact, we can have a discussion in F and A next time of roundtable, work session, how we're gonna orchestrate the conversation with council.
Okay, so you're running out of time. Because the next one, this is a 5 Monday month. And so it would be, you only have after Monday, you only have 3 council meetings left.
And-
So,
So we have two
and
in
those are getting
November and
jam-packed
one in
with
November.
ERP and property tax and everything else, all the discussions. So
November 13th, there's a proposed roundtable for the community survey results.
Mhm.
And at the November 27th, there's a proposed roundtable for affordable housing. But we could do December 11th.
It's probably a little late in the discussion. Go ahead, Councilor.
I think those 2 other topics sound like the ones that need to push. They're not relevant for year end. This is, so I think we just gotta pick the order. And it may be that some of the other topics push out a tad.
Again, let's talk that in the next F and A and make a decision from there. We don't need to make that decision tonight.
so why can't you make it tonight? I mean,
Huh?
why can't you review it tonight then?
So review what? The legislative priorities?
Whatever we're going to do next time, why can't you do it tonight?
Because I'm not prepared tonight, okay? I requested that it be sent out again and we have the discussion in the next F and A. I didn't hear any objections.
Okay.
Okay, if you guys want to carry on, I can step back and let you go.
I would feel comfortable pushing it to the following F and A committee meeting. Like Councilmember Holloway, I'm not prepared to have this discussion.
Okay, so can we have it next F and A?
Yes, we'll send it out and then Councilor Mayhew, if you could input your comments into that, that would be great. Other than,
You can see I've got them ready, so I'll do that.
Right.
Mayor, that sounds
that'd be
fantastic.
great.
He did his homework.
No, but I think,
Yeah.
Chair,
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
think Mayor's point is she's trying to get us to be even more prepared by already seeing whatever comments we might have. She's trying to make this move more quickly, so I agree with that.
Okay, I agree.
Once,
So-
once we get to it, yeah.
So Chair, do you think that we should have comments ready to, have everything reviewed and comments ready to go?
We
for
should
the next
review,
F&A
have ready
committee?
comments,
Okay.
and if you're really doing your homework, forward comments on to
Okay,
mayor and
Mayor.
city administrator.
Okay.
That here's my questions, comments in advance. Okay, so we can get through the conversation quickly.
just one more thing.
Go ahead.
So Madam Mayor, when would you like, could you put out a deadline? When would you like that information back to you by?
Tonight.
In an hour, ideally.
Realistically.
I'll ask our city
yeah.
clerk, when would you be able to file them? You want to see it late next week?
So if we're looking at 2 weeks from tonight, the 31st would be our next F and A committee meeting. Oh, because
No,
we're
fifth
5
week.
Mondays, right? So
Right.
The
actually,
next
so now it's-
meeting would be the
1st of November.
7th.
okay. Election.
So I would say, I mean, if you could have it by Halloween, that'd be great.
Okay, a week
Okay.
before. Sounds good. Will do. Thank you.
All right, and then discussion item number 8, funding employee costs for property tax levy, utility rates. Go ahead, Councilor Mayhew.
So I think this is on, at my request at council. I think, as was just pointed out, we're running out of time in the year. I think, now I'm mindful that we're in open session, so I'll be thoughtful in my comments. It's publicly known that we're in discussions already with the Teamsters on a contract, that whatever contract we ultimately sign with them goes retroactively back to the beginning of this year. That's when the current contract expired. And then we're in discussions with another union, and then there's the third union. So, and then there's M&P that follow after that, often largely building on what happens with our union contracts. So one doesn't need to know either the city's negotiating position or any of the union negotiating positions to be aware of what's going on in the economy and what has happened in the last year, what has happened with inflation. We know what is being asked and being negotiated at other similar cities. That's public knowledge. So with that in mind, it seems clear that we have an enormous challenge in how on earth are we going to fund what is likely to be the ultimate a resolution of those union and M&P, union negotiations, M&P. And it's not hard to figure out that when you look at our budget, it looks like the amount of money that's there and the amount of money that we're likely going to need are not the same number. And so I think we have to move now on doing something about getting sufficient revenue into that equation to pay for these things. We can't lose a whole year, for example, of rates. So we heard tonight, we're going to get some updated rate information in time to make a move on utility rates. But I think we need to start moving on, well, a couple things. Property tax in particular. I think sales tax, we do not charge the maximum sales tax that we are permitted to charge. We don't charge as much as North Bend. We don't charge as much as Issaquah. There are sources of revenue that are available to the council manic sources that we need to consider whether we need to move on now, I think, because the sooner we pass that, the sooner we start collecting those dollars. And then I think you even add up all of that and you're way short likely of what we need. I think we're going to have to go to the taxpayers and talk about a levy lid lift to cover this. Council's limited to 1% a year. And there is nobody who believes that we're going to get away with a 1% increase to our union contracts. Not going to happen. So, by the way, that's not all our sources. That's only about half our revenue. So I think we've got to move on this and we've got to move quickly. And if we're going to need to go to the voters, that's a many months long process to get that teed up and happen. And we've got to get the ball rolling. We can't keep talking about it. We've got to start rolling. Even if we don't yet know the exact amount that'll go in, we've got to get a process going. We've got to get we've got to have a process to figure out the amounts, but we can't wait. We've got to start the process of the necessary ordinances. We've got to, there will need to be pro and con committees. There's a question of which ballots we can get on. There's a whole process and we must get this going. Every day we delay is another chunk of money that it just means that since some of these are retroactive, it just means that we're going to have to ask for all the more if we don't ask sooner. So I think we should do the following. I think number one, we should ask for an analysis from staff of how much is available to us and this is not a secret. Anyone could do this analysis by looking at our budget, which is online, but an analysis of how much is available, the difference between our revenues over the next 3 years and so there's general fund revenues, and operating expenditures. What's the difference that we have available to fund these increases? We need to know the same for utility funds, which we'll know once we get this updated information that we just heard we're going to get. And then we need to know what other revenue sources are available, councilmanic revenue sources are available and how much money that is, for example, sales tax. And then we've got to do an analysis here and soon of that information to figure out, okay, now how much more and where would we get it? And if that's a property tax levy lid lift, let's get going on putting that on the ballot.
I'm curious, what councilmatic sources do you think there are?
So the only ones so off the top, so I haven't done a study and I don't know, but I believe that there is a sales tax possibility. And of course, the 1% property tax would be councilmanic possibility. Those are the only two oh, and then of course, utility rates are councilmanic. So those are on top of my mind. What I don't know is, are there any others? So for example, I've heard another council member talk about a public safety sales tax possibility. I'm not really aware of the details on that. I don't know if that could be used for wages or not, or operations. So I just don't know what else is out there. And so that's my question, is what possibilities are there? Let's get clear as to what those are and how much we're talking about. And therefore then, okay, what are we left with? So, and so we left some room in our budget. So we know there's some room there, plus these councilmanic sources. And then what are we left with? Because we got to get rolling on going to the voters to ask for that and to present the choice to them of, because the choice will be fund it, or we have to cut levels of service. And we need to start making that pitch. I think our community is largely unaware of that right now, and that we need to start changing that as soon as possible. Have time for the discussions, have time for the community to get their minds around this before they have to vote on it, and for them to make the hard decision. Am I willing to pay whatever it is it ends up being? So yeah, sorry, Mayor, I went a little bit longer. Those are the only ones that I'm aware of, but I am suspicious that there are others I'm not aware of. So I just want to make sure whether that's true or false.
So, oh, you had your hand up.
Oh, no, no.
I'm good with that part of it. I'm leery of what assumptions we do, budget versus revenue. What assumptions do we put into that analysis with our labor contracts out there in negotiation? I don't want to presume anything on those labor contracts. Okay. I mean, the short answer is we ain't got the money no matter what, but I don't want to presume anything to give false indications. So how do we have that conversation at this stage? Go ahead.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I think what I'm asking for now is an assessment of what I believe is publicly available information only. That is what's available in the budget, what councilmanic sources are available. Anyone who wanted to figure this out could go research this and figure it out right off our website, right off state and city websites. So that's all knowable. So that gets us an idea of what we have available. You're right. Then the question becomes, okay, but what ultimately will be negotiated? I think then we can have a conversation about, okay, well, so let's just, I'm just going to make up numbers that have no basis at all, but so I'll use silly numbers just so that no one misconstrues them. Let's say that the request was for an increase, not the request, that the ultimate negotiation was for a 500% increase in compensation. And we discovered that we only have enough funds available for a 200% increase. Well, then we would know that we have a 300% delta that we have to go to the voters on. So I think step one is let's figure out what we've got available to do ourselves. And then which we don't know now where these will end, but now as we have discussions about, as those discussions are happening, those negotiations, and we get a sense of where they're likely to end, we've got a real clear idea of where we might likely end on this, but in the meantime, we know there's going to be something, so let's get all the mechanisms in place. And then we just have to drop in the number once we know it. Does that make sense?
Priest, I just don't, I am reluctant to estimate or presume any number until those contracts are done. Okay, so it may just be take what you got and move it out at this stage. Even that'll probably show us that we're short. And we can make inflation on all the rest of the stuff. It's the labor, just extend the current contract out as is. And see what that comes up with in inflation and all the rest, and then we can have a discussion, and we'll know we'll be worse from there. Once these contracts come in, but I don't want to make any assumption on what those labor contracts come in at this stage.
Yeah, no, completely agree. So the analysis that I'm thinking it might say, oh, look, you could come up with up to a 200% increase out of existing council managed sources, whether it's room in the budget or additional taxes, fine. Then that gives us the base to know, based on in the future, once those contracts come in, then we'll know what our delta is, and we can move quickly to going to the voters for that delta.
You should participate in this conversation. Is that as clear as mud to you of what kind of the analysis you're asking for? Yeah, go ahead.
I do want to add this. I was at an event last night and this very topic came up. To your point, Councilmember Mayhew, I agree. I don't think the citizens, the voters from a general perspective have an idea that potentially, from what I hear you both saying, it really kind of doesn't matter. We don't have the money at the bank. So potentially there could be an ask of a levy lid lift. I don't generally, how can I say this? From the conversations I had last night, I don't think there's that understanding out there.
No,
and I do agree that depending on where the number comes in, I mean, this conversation should be had sooner than later.
Okay.
Just add that.
Does the ask, at least as far as financial forecast, make sense?
Let me just clarify. You said delta. You also said revenues, operating revenues that exceed expenditures. Is that what you mean by, sorry?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so just to be clear, the part where we look at the delta, that's for council. We're not asking, and I think this Councilmember Holloway's point of view, point is we are not asking staff to do anything with regard to a delta, because that would require making assumptions.
We don't. Okay.
Right? So we're going to have to be able to see the delta ourselves. But this gives us a base of here's what's available in the budget. So, we're looking at, say, 3-year contract periods. So, if we look at 3 years, okay, in the general funds, here's your forecasted revenues, here's your forecasted expenses. Here's what's left over available to you. Okay, so that's one source. Then these other council managed revenue sources and how much that might throw in per year if we were to do those. That gives us a sense of existing inputs. So I think that's what I'm asking to happen now.
Okay.
Then what I'm asking is council would then use that to be thoughtful as we go through the union negotiations. I think that might be a useful tool for management as well, but I imagine they've got even better tools than that. But anyway, useful tool for us to talk with administration about how they're going through that. But then once we do reach those union contracts, then we're in a position to quickly move. Okay, now we know the delta because we know what we've got available. Now we can move quickly to, how much, and then we drop that in. But in the meantime, we can also use that to say, hey, community, we got this much available. You don't have to be a genius to know unions are probably asking more than that. So therefore, this is, the only path is to go back to you, the voters. We can get that conversation started.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Yeah, take this. His delta is status quo plus the new contracts is what you're using the term delta. What we're really asking for is take the current status quo, project it forward, tell us budget revenues, what that kind of looks like, and then we can have a discussion of if there's a gap between those two figures, and structurally, there's going to be a gap sometime or another. How do we start to address that?
Yeah, and we see how much that is.
Inflation is never 1%.
It would actually have to be 0.5% for our system to work.
Yeah, first it works. I mean, ultimately, it doesn't work. Good enough. You
Well, I could speak to, you mentioned the public safety tax, 0.1%. I believe that that's a voted one. I think it's a simple
Ah.
majority. I think the other one that you're talking about, like Councilmanic, is the transportation, also a 0.1%. We voted that in 2022, but I think there's some remaining.
I also have the idea, which may be false, that just our sales tax rate, which I believe is councilmanic, is not at the maximum it's allowed to be, even though surrounding communities are. So just validate if that's true, and if so, is that indeed a councilmanic thing or not?
I'll look into that. I don't have an answer tonight.
Yeah, so if you can tell, and I would go even, I would say, what can council do and what are the limits? And then what would have to go, to the voters and the structure of those, is it simple majority or super majority or whatever. And that'd be just a good sheet for us to have in front of us.
Okay.
And maybe gives a sense of how many dollars per year that might generate. So sometimes, like you've observed the council, we love to chase down every little rabbit, and sometimes we'll chase down a rabbit that produces $10,000 of revenue a year, which is not, we just don't have the time for that. We need to focus where we can actually move the ball in a significant way. So help us know kind of the dollar amount. Oh, at least one council member's not sure I'm right.
No,
We've never, we may or may not chase down small dollar items.
Oh, in a heartbeat.
No, but
Anyway, but
help
listen.
us see where to focus is kind of, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Further discussion on that? All right, the rest of the agenda is,
Chair, just
Okay.
on that, just if we could get whatever could be done by our next meeting, I think we've got to go with what we can. So that's, look, you cannot do everything you might like to do in the time we're giving you. So give us what you can, because we have limited time to act, and we need to start acting even with, shall we say, incomplete information. We got to start acting while we wait for more complete information subsequently.
all right. Remaining items on the agenda are informational only upcoming items. So why don't we go ahead and move to review draft of city council agenda. Right. Reception at 6 p.m., lifetime of service recognition for Carol Peterson. And then at 7 p.m., we'll move to regular council. Call to order, pledge of allegiance, agenda approval, public hearings, appointments, proposal appointment to and confirmation of city administrator. Deep down, I want to get into that tonight before we have a candidate. Go ahead.
So I only have one comment on the city council agenda. The rest looks great. My comment is this. It is my belief right now that there are not the votes to confirm a city administrator. And so I think that we need to, if we're going to have this item on the agenda, then something needs to change between now and then to get council members' votes on board for this. I think there's a very high level of concern about open session. There's a very high level of concern about where city staffing is, both at the director level and perhaps at the next level down, and kind of what needs to be done to successfully address that. And I think that the council members are wanting to ensure that they see a clear and convincing plan on that from the new city administrator before they're going to be willing to approve that person. So there's various ways we could get to that. One might be obviously meetings with council members prior to that time. One might be some sort of sessions where council members can interview, I suppose, the candidate. I don't think that sounds like the best path, but whatever path, I think there needs to be a path, because as it is right now, my concern is, by the way, I don't even know who the person is that's going to be proposed. So this has nothing to do with that individual. I don't even know who it would be, but my concern is that as it stands right now, that might not get approved. In fact, let me put it differently. I believe it won't get approved unless something changes between now and there. So I just want to encourage something to happen, because whoever this is, I think we'd be in a real mess if we put it up for a vote and then the person doesn't get approved and we're all sort of wondering why and where do we go from here and so on. So I'm trying to encourage us to get in front of that so that doesn't happen.
I guess point of order, what's the protocol? So if we have the vote and we can't confirm person, what happens?
We continue as is with the acting city administrator.
So does that mean administration?
Forever and ever.
Okay. Cool. So does that mean administration would go back out, find another candidate, potentially bring another candidate before the?
So let me do this. Let's table the conversation for a minute.
Okay.
Let's go through the rest of the agenda. I would then like an executive session.
Okay.
To further dive into this. I don't want to get into details in open forum about a potential hire or whatever. Okay, inappropriate. So
Okay.
Can we table for a minute? Go through
Absolutely.
the rest of the agenda. Sounds pretty, the rest of the agenda sounds
Pretty
good to go
straightforward.
through,
Yep,
pretty
yep.
straightforward, and we can go to executive session. Have the
Okay.
conversation.
So could someone just check with legal counsel? I want to make sure we know exactly the bounds of what we can and can't discuss in this regard in executive session. I just don't want to break any rules.
All I'm going
I'm
to
trying to be
discuss
supportive
is,
here. I don't even know who the person is. I
all I'm
just
going
want
to
it to work.
discuss is the history leading to here and the candidate who will be discussed, and that
Okay.
is it.
Let's just make sure that that's permissible in executive session
Is that-
before we do it.
Okay,
That is fine.
Yeah.
It is a, yeah, we have the RCW for HR.
So you can go into closed session.
all right.
What, you can't really go into executive session without
Okay,
an
so-
attorney.
I use them
Closed, right?
Closed
You do
session.
closed session.
inappropriately synonymously. So yes, let's go into closed session to talk, basically HR discussions.
And that's permissible, city clerk, to your knowledge. I know you're not an attorney.
Right.
Oh, she might-
Well, for collective bargaining sessions, it's permissible, yes. So,
If we were talking employee performance and hiring and all that stuff,
that's
that's,
an executive session.
okay, we'll leave it on the agenda, we'll have a discussion. I'm willing just for us three to have a conversation after this.
Okay.
A non-closed session, just us three, so we're not a quorum
Okay.
of what's going on, okay?
Okay.
All right, in the meantime, I'm gonna leave it on the agenda.
Good idea.
All right. Question. The lifetime. Okay, we'll then do lifetime service recognition of Carol Peterson. I guess my only question is, can we do part of that? Can we do that as part of the 6 PM section?
So part of the well, so we're going to give her actually a plaque during the council meeting. But most of the discussion, everything else will be at the 6 PM.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to get home before 11 o'clock. I finally. All right, then we'll do proclamations, kindness month. We'll move into consent agenda, approval of council minutes, approval of claims. We also moved, just in case, we did move the ADA transition plan up under consent, unless there are objections, and you can pull it out. And you offered, none of us, we agree. Let's move the amendment agreement legal services up under consent. Okay, that will leave us with, we have no ordinances. We have a CIP presentation and community center presentation. Okay, I'm really can we move the CIP to next council? Thank you. Let's have discussion. Staff has worked up based on the work we approved to go, what options and costs and discussion from there. Okay. F&A will have, no items when pop up. We'll have community center. We'll have councilman regional liaison updates, reports, mayor reports, commission committee liaison reports, and potential for 2 executive sessions. And then we move to adjournment. Any, other alterations? Okay, so with those changes as noted, we'll go ahead and move the council agenda forward to next week. Other items for the committee to discuss tonight? You're just scratching?
Keep scratching it.
It's just checking. Oh. So unless there are objections, I'll move to adjourn. I do ask that the 2 council members present remain for conversation with me. We are adjourned. Go ahead and shut us off, Jenny.